Again, great to see all of you here this morning, and I think we'll move right into our program. Yes?
You can say the date of the Twins.
May 25th. Wednesday, May 25th is the Twins game. So, again, that's, Wednesday, May 25th. The game starts at 12:10. So we should be back in town, I would think, by 4:30. All right. Our first speaker this morning is a research professor at the Hormel Institute at the University of Minnesota. Now, the Hormel Institute is an internationally recognized leader in cancer research and is consistently published in the world's top scientific journals. I don't know if you realize it or not, but cancer has now surpassed heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans under the age of 80. Cancer death rates are predicted to increase by 45% over the next 15 years, mainly because of our aging population. But here this morning to join us and discuss can a healthy diet prevent cancer, would you please welcome Dr. Ann Bode. Give her a hand. Thank you for being here.
So nice to see something. So nice to see so many friendly faces. Speaking of things on the tables in the back, there's a tray of dark chocolate that it's anti-cancer. It's made by Hy-Vee for the Hormel Institute. It contains ingredients that we have studied that show that each one of them prevents cancer. And so it has cranberries, walnuts, dark chocolate, and ginger. So please help yourself at the break, or now if you want. All right, so today I'm going to talk about diet and cancer and a few other things. First of all, I bet you that most of you didn't know that Austin, Minnesota had a cancer research institute named the Hormel Institute. So historically, I'll just give you a little background. We are a University of Minnesota department. We have extensive collaborations with Mayo Clinic, IBM, and the University of Minnesota Rochester. So the Institute was actually, or is, the legacy of J.C. Hormel, who was longtime president and CEO of George A. Hormel Company, now known as Hormel Foods Corporation. In 1939, Mr. Hormel established the Hormel Foundation. And the Hormel Foundation was established to protect the family, but also to protect the company, to keep the company in Minnesota. So it will never leave Minnesota. And the Hormel Foundation is a major stockholder in Hormel Foods, so that's one reason it won't leave the state. And the foundation is one of the largest charitable foundations in Minnesota. And it donates millions of dollars every year to organizations in Mower County, including the Hormel Institute. Mr. Hormel's dream was to create a scientific laboratory in his hometown of Austin, Minnesota. So the Hormel Institute was established in 1942 by Mr. Hormel, and with an agreement with the University of Minnesota. And this makes it one of the U.S.'s oldest research centers. So it's been there a long time. And no, we do not research spam, in case you wonder. So we actually are not really affiliated with Hormel Foods at all, although we do have collaborations with them, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The mission of the Institute is to conduct research in biological science with applications in medicine and agriculture. So these were the first laboratories that were established. They were housed in the Hormel estate in 1942 in the old, well, actually it was a remodeled horse stable. And so they had made a stable into cutting-edge research laboratories where they did all kinds of things. I'll tell you a little bit about some of that. The early research, remember, this is 1942, so it's World War II. So the first research focused on food stability, and that's how the canned meat idea came about, because of the troops needed some kind of good, nourishing food, and so Spam came to be. So one of the most noteworthy projects, besides food stability and preservation and lipid analysis, was the development of a miniature pig called a Swiss swine. And this was a pig that was about 60 pounds. And it was developed for cardiovascular research. And it was used for many years for research for developing the first pig valves that were transplanted into humans. During this period of time, there was also an animal trainer that worked for television. And he heard about the Swiss swine and the small pig that could be easily handled. So all of the pigs that played Arnold on Green Acres came from the Hormel Institute. So that's some trivia. So the Hormel Institute also is responsible for developing the omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And I think you've probably all heard of omega-3 and omega-6 there. Omega-3 is very good for you, omega-6 is not so good. So, what do we do down there in Austin? What is the research focus? Well, we try to study and determine why and what causes cancer in many, but not everybody. Many people, but not all people. Is it the luck of the draw? Or can we prevent cancer? That's really the big question. So cancer has actually, as Rod said, has surpassed heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans under the age of 80. You probably know some of this material, but for reviewing, cancer occurs in stages. The first stage is initiation. This is a very short phase when you're exposed to a carcinogen like sunlight, a chemical, and you have an initiation period where cancer causes your gene damage, your DNA damage. And that can occur by smoking, by air pollution, by a lot of different things. The second stage, and the longest stage, is promotion. This stage can last anywhere from 10 to 50 years. This is a period of time where cancer develops from those initiated cells. And then the last stage is where you actually see the tumor, the progression stage, and then it can go on to be malignant. Each of these stages is a potential target for anti-cancer activity or prevention agents because of its length. So it's very important what goes on in this stage. So have we made any progress after 45 years? Over 45 years ago, President Nixon declared a war on cancer in 1971 by signing the National Cancer Act. The problem is, yes, we have made a lot of progress, but people think cancer is all the same. And the reality is, it's actually not one disease, it's more like 200 diseases. Every cancer is different. And even each organ cancer, like breast cancer, there are many types of breast cancer. And so that makes it very difficult to get a handle on how to treat it and how to prevent it. However, the death rates for cancer in the U.S. have really dropped dramatically, especially between 1990 and 2016 now. So here's a graphic that just shows, for example, since 1975 to about 1990, cancer was really on the increase, and especially in men. Men have many more cancers than women. As you see, it drops off toward 2011. If we look by race and gender, black men are most commonly get cancer, followed by white men, then black women, and then white women. However, we have made progress, and what this shows is that the total number of cancer deaths have been averted in men and women. So if you look at the blue line, this is the actual number of cancers that have occurred. This was what was projected before we had made progress. So we really have decreased the number of cancers in this country. Cause and prevention of cancer are very tightly linked. So there are two key milestones that have occurred over the last few years in cancer research. One is that we now understand that lifestyle has a big influence on whether you're going to have cancer or not. The second, you all are probably familiar with the hype. We've sequenced the human genome, meaning that we know every gene that occupies the human body. We don't necessarily know what they do, but we've identified every single gene. So we believe that preventing cancer is just as important as treating it. So cancer affects older people. It's the law of odds. The longer we live, the more likely we're going to get cancer. So stopping the disease before it starts could have a huge impact on the cost and the morbidity. According to the National Institutes of Health, cancer care in 2010 was almost $264 billion in costs, including lost productivity and cancer death. So this graphic shows that the WHO, the World Health Organization, says that 50% of cancers can be prevented. So that means in 2005 there were 7.6 million cancer deaths. So almost 4 million of those could have been prevented. They also say that global cancer deaths will increase by 50% from 2011 to 2030. So where's the disconnect? Why? The biggest reason is the aging population. Baby boomers, a lot of us here. The majority of cancer diagnosis is in people that are 65 and older. So in 2010, the baby boomers were 13% of the US population. By 2030, they will be about 20% of the population. So that will drive up the increase in cancer. Okay, in this graphic, just want to show you the trends among men in cancer. You'll notice in 1930, there was very, very little lung cancer, hardly any. It was one of the lowest cancer rates. But it increased dramatically by 1990. And now, today, it's leveling off again, going down. What do you think that's due to? Smoking, tobacco. This is maybe one you didn't realize. In 1930, the most common cancer in this country was stomach cancer. Now, it's almost non-existent. There's still some, but it's almost non-existent. What do you think that's due to? Diet. Absolutely diet. And now we have refrigeration. We have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. We have a better diet overall and better ways to preserve food. You'll see that this is the same for women. Maybe go back here one time. Okay, I wanted to just point out that the most common cancers for men are lung, prostate, and colon cancer. The two cancers that are increasing for men and women are pancreatic and liver. And the reason for that is because of too late to detect it. There are no symptoms usually, and so it's very difficult to detect. And once it's detected, it's almost always too late. This is the same for women, except that you'll notice that women, the incident of cancer rate is about half that of men. And nobody really knows why. They think it might be due to hormone differences, but nobody really knows. And again, the most common for women, lung is still number one for both men and women, and then followed by breast and colon. So here we see that more than 50, these are the preventable causes. Occupational exposure, meaning asbestos exposure, any kind of carcinogen. environmental pollution, infections, tobacco, and then you'll see this huge block of cancers that can be prevented if you change your diet, if you lose weight, if you do physical activity. So these are just some illustrations. Here, this poor gentleman is in prison, but the warden says a life sentence isn't so bad. With good behavior, a poor diet, smoking, and lack of exercise, you'll be out in no time. So it's very important to pay attention to screening. So this graphic just shows, are you worried about cancer? Head-to-toe cancer screening, next exit, and they want to know if you have a drive-through option. Because people are very resistant to getting screened for certain kinds of cancers. So, what if it's painful or embarrassing? I just don't have the time. It's not relevant. Why do I need to go? Well, here are some of the preventable cancers, and this is not a secret. I think you probably know this. Sun-induced cancers. So this graphic, has a tanning bed, and it just says select a cancer. Basal cell, squamous, melanoma. Tobacco-induced lung and oral cancers. Tobacco really does induce, it affects all your body, not just your lungs. Obesity-linked breast, colorectal, and endometrial. H. pylori, which is a stomach bacteria, causes gastric cancer. And then there are other cancers associated with infection, like HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. Those can all be prevented. So what do we know? I'll have an ounce of prevention. So if you do colorectal cancer screening, 50% reduction right off the bat. If you do vaccination against HPV or hepatitis B, that can prevent 70 to 100% reduction in cervix and liver cancers. If you take selective estrogen receptor modulator, women, that's like something like tamoxifen, that can reduce breast cancers by 40 to 50%. Aspirin is a very good anti-cancer agent. It's very good to prevent colon cancer. The only trouble with aspirin is that some people can't tolerate it because it causes gastric bleeding. But if you can tolerate it, it's excellent cancer prevention. Smoking, 75% reduction, and changes in weight and activity can decrease 40 to 60% of all types of cancers. So this is a research project that came out of the Institute in 2009 and made a lot of headlines in U.S. News and World Reports because what it did was show that periodic dieting, like the yo-yo diet, can cut breast cancer risk. And so these are the statistics. A lot of us are overweight, obese. 30% of colon, breast, endometrial, kidney, and esophageal cancer are linked to obesity. About 20% of cancer deaths are linked to unhealthy weight. And what happened at the Institute, intermittent caloric restriction provided greater protection from mammary tumor development than did chronic dieting or no dieting. Now this is a mouse study, so whether it can really be extrapolated to humans, that's still in progress. So it's thought that the caloric restriction acts by changing hormone levels. And that seemed to be, basically it lowered the insulin levels, which deprived the cancer cells of nutrition. So this suggests that a lean diet, controlled lean protein and ample nutrients on a yo-yo diet might be good for you. So I'll explain what happened exactly. It was a mouse study, and we had there are mice that are genetically obese. They had a propensity to get big, and they did get big. So the researcher that did this divided them into 3 groups. One group ate everything they wanted. The second group was chronically restricted in caloric intake by 25% during the whole time. And the other group went on, could eat everything they wanted for 2 weeks, and then was 25% restricted for another 2 weeks. And that went on for a year. And so what happened was that the mice that ate everything they wanted, they had 70% of those mice had mammary tumors, which mimics breast cancer in humans. The mice that were chronically restricted, only 35% of those had mammary tumors. So that was, that worked to restrict yourself all the time. But the mice that were on the intermittent diet, only 9% of those got tumors. So that caused a big stir in the world of nutrition, even though it was an animal study. So this just shows that the American Institute for Cancer Research links all of these cancers to excess body fat. So it's colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and so on. This is what's predicted among U.S. adults in 2030 that means a BMI, a body mass index greater than 30. You can see almost every state has an obesity problem or an overweight problem. So the continuation in obesity trends will lead to about 500,000 additional cases of cancer by 2030. But if every adult decreased that BMI by 1%, which is 2 pounds, this would actually prevent the increased number and would decrease it by about 100,000. So you can go online and calculate your BMI. Basically, there's a formula to do it. And if you end up with something like this, obesity is 30, anywhere here is overweight, 18.6 to 24.9 is a healthy weight. So, strong link between all of these cancers and being overweight. Now, physical activity. I bet you didn't know this, because I don't think I really knew it. But a lack of physical exercise is a leading cause of death worldwide. There's no other single intervention that you can do that is associated with such a diverse array of good effects as having good physical activity. So here's the caveat, I guess. It's known that obesity and lower levels of physical activity are associated with cancer. But it's really not known whether weight loss or increased physical activity will make you live longer necessarily. Which, nothing is straightforward, right? Mm-hmm. So this just shows a graphic of if you do daily activity, if you do like an hour a day, your cancer risk indicators are very low. And if you're sedentary, they're very high. And so basically the doctor's saying, what fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? So we know smoking is a major risk factor. But what we probably didn't know is that diet is the second leading cause for cancer. So this is not a new idea. This is a Chinese medical text that says medicine and food share the same origin. Both drugs and food should be used for treatment of disease. It says all that there. So the Hormel Institute is actually a world leader, internationally known, for showing that small molecules found in food, dietary factors, can actually directly control human genes and proteins that are important in human cancer development. So it is a war against cancer, but to win that war, we really have to know the enemy. We have to understand how cancer develops. And the prevailing thought today is that cancer may be prevented or treated by targeting specific genes and proteins found only in cancer cells, and diet might be a key to that. Cancer cells and normal cells are very different. They have even different proteins and different genes that make them grow. Here's the problem. Clinical trials generally have not supported a role for individual specific food factors or molecules in preventing cancer. The beta-carotene trial that was done years ago showed that it actually increased lung cancer when it was by itself. And the selenium trial and the vitamin E trials that were recently stopped, they had no effect. And there was some evidence that the vitamin E actually increased prostate cancer. But, you know, it had to be stopped. So there's a lot of disconnect between what is known and what actually isn't known. This is one of the big problems. And this is one of my favorite comics because it illustrates exactly what happens. We have pop science. There's so much pop science, meaning that every day you read something, and this couple, they say, oh, what do you know? Coffee is good for you again. Then she's reading, oh, so is wine. Oops, too late, it's bad again. And he says here, many natural substances have curative powers. And then she says, well, then you'll like the poison ivy, asbestos, cow pie, gravel salad we're having for dinner. And then she goes on, she says, according to a new study, people who have children actually live longer than people who don't. And here come the kids. And then she throws up the paper and talk about bad science. And that's exactly right. There's so much bad science out in the world. Because you know you can go online and you can find all kinds of stuff. Well, we think at the Institute, we actually do very good science. And we study how specific molecules or specific food factors actually interact with proteins and genes in cancer cells. And we can do that because we have a lot of technology at the Institute. We have supercomputers, we have all kinds of modeling. We can take a look at a protein right in our hand practically. And so we've developed a system for identifying the important cancer genes and proteins, and then developing agents that can stop those from acting and causing uncontrolled growth. So there are many natural compounds or phytochemicals. A phytochemical is derived from a plant that are contained in our diet that have anti-cancer effects. So you'll appreciate this because this is a new study says a glass of red wine a day helps prevent cancer. It's a pretty big glass of wine. So here's a list of some of the anti-cancer foods. And basically what it boils down to is fruits and vegetables, basically. So cashews, coffee, grapes, red wine, peanuts, ginger, flax, and so on. There's all kinds of foods that have anti-cancer effects. So here's the big question. Are supplements safe or effective? You can go to GNC and you can buy beta-carotene, you can buy a T compound called EGCG, you can buy selenium, you can buy vitamin E and C and resveratrol. But is it safe? Does it do you any good to shovel in those supplements? Most of the time, they don't have very good what's called bioavailability. Your body doesn't take them up. You just pee them out, basically. So the bottom line is there's no scientific evidence at all that supports the safety or effectiveness of long-term supplement use in preventing cancer. And in fact, it may be harmful. So here's an example. This compound is called resveratrol. It was a hot molecule in the late 90s because a lot of groups studied it in animal studies, mouse studies, and it had very, very potent anti-cancer activity in laboratory cells and mice. So everybody jumped on the bandwagon and said, okay, let's have it. Let's do it. Let's make resveratrol. Let's take it. So turned out it was toxic. if you put it in a pill and just take it. And it caused a lot of problems. So that's the kind of stuff you don't want to get caught up in. Another problem is that EGCG, I think you've maybe heard of it, it's in green tea. It's the major compound. You can go to GNC and you can buy it as a diet supplement because some people think you can lose weight with it. The problem is, NIH, National Institutes of Health, ran clinical studies, and we ran one with Mayo Clinic. And basically, EGCG doesn't work by itself. It has to have all its other buddies with it that are in green tea. And so it's not very useful to go buy it and take it. One other compound is capsaicin. Capsaicin is found in hot pepper. It's what makes your face burn when you eat hot Mexican food or hot salsa. And it's a compound, been around a long time. It has a very controversial role in cancer development. Some people say it prevents cancer. Some people say it causes cancer because it's associated with damage in the gastric tract, for example, if you eat too hot food. And what we did, we were studying it to show, first of all, it has been included as a primary ingredient in arthritis creams because it binds to that pain receptor that causes the burning, and it deactivates it. It actually eliminates it. And what we found was that if you apply capsaicin to the skin of mice again, and then expose them to sunlight, tumor development just goes out of control. It causes cancer in the presence of sunlight. So that's kind of a problem. Again, it's mouse studies. But, okay, finally, I want to talk a little bit about food as medicine, prevention and therapy of cancer. As I mentioned, we do work with Hormel Foods. We work with them as a collaborator and doing research, some of our findings, so that they develop products that are medical foods or functional foods that incorporate some of the things that we find into some of their foods. So a medical food is a food that's specially formulated and intended for dietary management of a disease that has distinctive nutritional needs that can't be met ordinarily. So these could be classified as nutritionally complex, incomplete formulas, or formulas for metabolic disorders, or for oral rehydration products. These are made specifically for people that have a disease like diabetes, or a cancer patient, for example, or somebody has a GI tract impairment. So these are foods that are developed just for them. And you may not know, but Hormel Foods has a huge natural food company that they purchased, Applegate. So they also have a health food branch, and so that's where these kinds of things are being developed. So what about nutrition and cancer treatment? Malnutrition is very common. It's a common problem in cancer patients, and it can really affect the outcome. Poor prognosis, poor outcome. The best diet is one that provides enough fluid, calories, and nutrients to maintain lean muscle mass and to keep the patient hydrated. You know, cancer patients generally, when they're undergoing treatment, many times are very, very ill and don't feel like eating. And so this is why there's a need for this. So the best advice is to enjoy fruits and vegetables, foods that are high in lean protein, like omega-3, low fat, whole grains, and so on. The main thing to avoid is sugar and refined carbohydrates, processed food. Cancer cells are different animals. They metabolize sugar. That's their preferential food because of the way they metabolize and the way they grow and the way they take up oxygen. They generally don't take up oxygen. They live on glucose or sugar. Functional foods, these are probably what you're more familiar with, is any fresh or processed food claiming to have a health-promoting ability or disease-preventing property. Cheerios are heart-friendly, right? We all know that. That's the advertisement. Functional foods include foods that have any kind of fortification with health-promoting additives, vitamin-enriched. You read it all the time. Fermented foods, like that have a probiotic effect, like yogurt, things like that. This is really a very popular and emerging field in food science because everybody's interested in staying healthy and living longer, right? So what are the take-home lessons? Cancer is no longer a definite death sentence. Many, many, many people survive cancer now, more than ever. Early detection can prevent or cure many cancers. This is very, very important. Lifestyle choices can also prevent many cancers. Your diet, physical activity, and your weight. So what's the latest thing? Precision medicine or precision oncology is now how treatment and prevention are being approached. So this means because we know the gene sequence of every human is the same, basically. We know that no two cancers are the same. So what's happening now in the clinic and even in the prevention mode is that people are getting their gene profile. So you can get a profile of your genetic makeup for $500, let's say, something like that. And that can show up, be compared with, if you had cancer, it can be compared with your cancer cell sequence. And then the therapy can be targeted against those genes that are expressed or highly activated in cancer. So that's really what's happening in the medical field today, is that it's individualized medicine more and more and more. And it's even being taken over into the prevention field so that, you know, you've all heard of Angelina Jolie. She discovered she had the BRCA genes, and so she had a double mastectomy. You know, that's one, you know, that probably was okay in her case, but that's the idea, is that people find if they have a genetic mutation, they can figure out if they're susceptible or have a high risk for certain kinds of cancers. And so that's really what's happening in the medical field. So this is not a new thought. Let your food be your medicine, and medicine your food. And this is the last illustration. This is what, you know, we wondered, could this be true? What will never happen? Here comes the young scientist. A breakthrough, sir. I've just discovered the cure for cancer. Big Pharma says, brilliant, let's skip the patent process and give it to the whole world for free. What would really happen, the guy comes in, discovered a cure for cancer. Big Pharma says, you're fired. It would devastate our repeat business. So, you know, there's a lot of, who knows, Big Pharma? Maybe. So here we are in Austin, Minnesota. This is our facility. It's become pretty extensive. We're going to be hiring we'll have 200, 250 scientists there. Group tours are always available, and you're welcome to come and visit. And please have some dark chocolate. Thank you. Grape juice also has it, but you need to watch the sugar, because a lot of those juices, like grape juice, is so high in sugar, and if it's added sugar, it's not so good. And, you know, that's one of the problems with some of the juices, is that they have so much sugar. So, sir.
Any comments on red meat?
I like it. You know, I think, you know, there's controversy about that. The American Institute of Cancer Research came out and said avoid red meat. But, you know, lean red meat, you know, I personally, I like it. I don't know that there's any concrete evidence, just like anything like that. There's really no concrete evidence that it's bad for you. If it's high fat, probably not so good. So besides, and the Hormel name is behind me.
I just wanted to refer back to the juices. We always buy the 100% juice, but still there's an awful lot of sugar in fruits and fruit
Right.
juices. So,
And that's, that, I think some people, that is a problem. That wouldn't probably be recommended for cancer patients, for example, because of the high
there's
sugar
a lot
content.
of sugar in there. Even.
And it's a natural sugar, but, if you go on the, what was the diet? Atkins or the
one-
that's not in phase 1 because of the high sugar. You're not going to lose weight with high sugar. And it's a natural sugar, but lots of other fruits are probably better. I think there's a lot of evidence that strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, black raspberries, those are excellent for you. There was a clinical trial that was run by a friend of ours for esophageal cancer and colon cancer using black raspberries, and they were very effective in preventing cancer in people. And strawberries, there was a clinical trial that was run in China by the same gentleman. Strawberries were very effective, and it was a concentrated powder. It wasn't the fresh fruit, but it was a concentrated powder made from the fresh fruit. So it was several grams a day, but they tolerated it well. So, are you ready?
I have a daughter that's an epidemiologist,
Mm-hmm.
and she was doing her study in pancreatic and liver cancer. She finally gave up because it was discouraging because she was losing all her patients. So now she switched to prostate and colon cancer. She has some interesting papers that she has written. She's been
Good.
doing that for quite a few years now. Works for the
Good.
city of Hope, California.
Oh, okay, great. Well, epidemiologists are very important to us because that's how we learn, what the trends are in cancers and other diseases all over the world. And I would say prostate and colon cancer, she'd probably be happier there because those are much more, well, first of all, they're detectable and preventable, whereas the pancreatic and the liver, that's very difficult. So,
We don't drink much soda ourselves, but diet soda versus the regular, which is really
None of the
worse
above. None.
than the regular.
I'd say the regular has too much sugar, and the artificial sweeteners probably aren't the best. So water would be a really good
Right.
idea.
It all boils down to moderation.
Yes, moderation, and just pay attention. And if you just walk 20 minutes a day, it'll make a huge difference. So just a little bit of exercise too. And you don't have to go fast. If you walk 3 miles at 2 miles an hour or 3 miles at 5 miles an hour, it's the same calories. Believe it or not, it's absolutely the same. So, the cardiovascular might be a little different, but the calories are the same. So, you don't need to be a marathoner. Anybody else? Eat that chocolate. Buy Hormel. Thank you.